Guys, hello. Are you ready for this one right here? Oh my goodness. We are getting into Genesis chapter 22. This is part 17 of the Bible study series. And I told you in the last video that, that this one was going to be a big one. And yeah, it is. It is so incredibly awesome. Get a notepad, a pen, a highlighter, make notes inside the Bible, draw pictures, whatever it is. But this one right here is mega. I said in the last one, I'll go as far as to say, not only is this one of the most important and greatest chapters in Genesis itself, but I gotta say, maybe in the entire Old Testament, and one of the most important in the entire Bible. This right here is incredible, and it's because of what we've talked about this whole time. The whole reason and the point, the purpose behind this Bible study is pointing out how even in the beginning here of this Bible, how every single thing that's going on and is taking place is leading us, right, is pointing us out more focused detail to God's Son, Jesus Christ, and in the most incredible ways. In this chapter right here, it does it in the most incredible way. I love this. I've spent, man, not enough time studying. You can't study this chapter enough, to be honest with you. I've studied it a lot, to prepare for this video, but you can just keep reading this and reading it and reading it and reading it and just meditate on it, pray about it, and God's still gonna hit you in a different way with just how incredible it is. So I am obviously excited about this one. Hope you guys are pumped for it as well. Get ready, because here we go, chapter 22. If you remember, we went through chapters, obviously, 20 and 21 in the last video, and we kind of ended there, with the covenant between Abraham and Abimelech. Before that was the whole, we obviously had the pinnacle of the promise, so far up to this point with God, the Lord promising a son, Isaac, through Sarah and everything. And it just happened, and we're like, yes, this is awesome. God came through with what he promised, as he will always do throughout the rest of his word and in our lives, what he has promised for us. And he certainly did there in the last few chapters and everything. And then when we saw where a little bit of that tension, that friction again between Hagar and Sarah due to Ishmael, Hagar's son, mocking, making fun of Isaac just in a very bad way and everything. So Hagar gets sent off. And we know what happened there. The Lord opened her eyes and made provisions for her, okay, for the sake of his promise to Abraham about Ishmael, making him into a great nation. So that's kind of a brief overview where we came from, and it's like everything's good. This is awesome. Again, God came through with his promise, and at the time that he promised. And here we go with chapter 22. So let's start. All right, verse 1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. Okay, want to point this out. Notice that it says sometime later. I read a lot of commentary, a lot of the scholars that have studied this for way, way longer than I have, and we'll get some clues in here that kind of point out how much time has gone by since the last few chapters and everything, with Isaac being born and everything. But we're going to kind of find out. We'll get a sense that he's grown enough to be able to understand certain things and do certain things and whatnot. We'll pick up on that in a minute. So but notice that it says God tested Abraham's faith. Okay, and this has got to be one of the greatest tests of faith obedience and trust that you will find in the entire Bible. In human history, this is absolutely amazing. Um, and it's awesome. Some of your translations, some of your Bibles may read it as God tempted Abraham. And I want to point that out because a lot of people say, well, God tempted. And it's not, it's not to tempt Abraham to trip up or slip up or to commit sin or anything like that. God does not tempt us into sin or into any sort of harm or anything like that. But more so, made a note here, more so to test, like my translation says here, or to prove himself, to prove his faith and his trust in God through the toughest of trials, which we're about to read through here. So, kind of keep that context in your mind right off the bat. Everything that we're about to read is for this purpose and also for something else as well. So we know first off the bat that the purpose of this chapter and this event that's about to happen is to test Abraham's faith. It's also going to uncover something so incredible. For now, this is a test, all right? So here we go. God calls out to Abraham. Abraham. He says, "Yes, here I am." Verse 2. "Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you." Man, and this is the craziest thing how this is set up, because again, we just came out of chapter 21 thinking great news, and God had just fulfilled, a piece of the promise, one of the most important pieces of the promise, which is the promised son, to Abraham through Sarah, who had been barren her entire life, and they were now at the age of 100 years old. And this miracle, this power of God that just, caused this to happen. And at the time that he said it was going to happen, and it's like right when we turn the page, yes, I know it says in the first verse, sometime later, but to us, it's like this is happening immediately, in our context, from our perspective. But still, even in this, even sometime later, he says, take your son, the promised son, your only son that I have given you, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go sacrifice him. You're going to kill him, sacrifice him as a burnt offering. Man, can you all right, first of all, can you imagine that in being in Abraham's shoes? We've done that, I think, a good bit when it came to Noah. Trying to put ourselves in his shoes in the context of this, and try to put yourself in Abraham's shoes right here. And we're going to get a sense of Abraham's shoes and just how he handles this, obviously. But can you imagine this again? Just after God does, I wrote this note, after God does the impossible and gives Abraham a son at his old age by Sarah, who was barren her whole life. And Isaac is the very thing that God promised to Abraham. And now you got to sacrifice him. You got to give him up. We might think, oh, this is crazy. But watch. Just look at Abraham's faith and what's going to happen. First, before we move on, though, I want you to make note of this. I want you to start noticing some of the underlying things, okay? Some of the things that are going to help us uncover that other purpose that I mentioned. And notice how God talks to him right here. Notice the wording that he uses. Take your son, your only son, whom you love so much. I want to point this out, is that this is the first time that love is used in the Bible? You can go check, all right? This is the first time that the word love is used in the Bible. Okay? Take your son, your only son, whom you love so much, and go sacrifice him. Sacrifice him as an offering. All right? Some of these words starting to sink in. I hope maybe they're a little bit familiar to you. Okay, and these are the words that God is using, okay, for Abraham. Look at this. We see how Abraham's going to handle this situation. So remember, God said, you're going to go to the land of Moriah, to this mountain, to one of the mountains that I will show you. So verse 3, the next morning, Abraham got up early. And I love that God gives a command, okay, and he does not hesitate. Look at the obedience, the promptness. Okay, we've talked about that a few times before, that sense of urgency and, fulfilling God's call. So he gets up early the next morning. He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Okay. Notice that it doesn't say anything of, there's no mention of rebuttal. There's no mention of questioning. There's no mention of doubt here or anything like that. And again, the Lord is giving this account. Okay, so, but Abraham, just the next morning, look at this faith and this obedience. He just gets going with what God said. Okay, saddled his donkey, took 2 of his servants along with Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire, for a burnt offering, and set out for the place God had told him about. And on the 3rd day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. So what does this tell us about this journey going to the land of Moriah? Okay, keep the land of Moriah, the mountain, of Moriah in your mind. We'll get back to that hopefully in just a second if I remember. If not, go look up where it is. Okay, if I forget, it's awesome where it is. Trust me, Jerusalem. So this was a 3-day journey. Okay, so this wasn't just go around the block and there it is off in the distance. No, Abraham's 100 years old. He's an old man, and he's got to travel 3 days. More importantly, about the context of this, the perspective of this, is think of the amount of time, okay, 3 days that Abraham had to contemplate this. This is the biggest thing that gets me when you talk about the test of faith, that, man, this journey and how long it lasted, how long this was just seeping in, soaking into maybe his mind, into his flesh. Maybe started, remember we talked about several times where fear started creeping in and his faith started leaking out, and man, this was opportunity for that to happen. Okay, especially regarding his son whom he loves so much. Man, think about that. Let's put ourselves in the midst of this test. That's incredible. So Abraham looked up and saw the place. And in verse 5, he told the servant, stay here with the donkey. This is very important. The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there, and then we will return. We will come right back. All right. Note time, highlight time. This is awesome. First thing, he says, the boy and I will travel a little farther. So he doesn't bring the servants with him. There's no outside influence here. It's just Abraham and his son that are going the rest of the way to fulfill this command of the Lord. And look at the word that Abraham uses here about this act of obedience right here. This is, man, I missed this a few times after reading it, but then I finally caught it. I'm like, he says, we will worship there. Okay, that's the first part of that sentence. Let's hang on to that for real quick. He says, we will worship there. Guys, when we think about worship, we're a lot of times people think about a good worship band and you're singing and lights and everything. Like, man, worship this morning. Oh, that was amazing. That got my spirit set on fire. But look at how Abraham, the father of faith, okay, who was in such a great deep relationship with God, look at how he puts worship in the context of this moment. And what does that mean is that man, these notes are awesome. That worship isn't just, getting something from the Lord, feeling goosebumpy and hair raising and all that, and hearing great music or great word or anything like that. But the ultimate, greatest, truest form of worship is obedience. Okay, when Abraham is saying that we will worship there, he is basically saying we are obeying what God has commanded us to do. Okay, we are going to worship. We are going to act out our faith, okay, and follow through with what God has told us to do. This is worship. This is worshiping the Lord. Okay, and following through with this. Think about that. Okay, we can go on into James chapter 2 where it talks about faith without works is dead. Okay, and again, right here, this part of worship, working out our faith. This is faith actually going into action, and this is what Abraham, the father of faith, says he considers worship. And that is awesome. Think about that. It's not just getting something, from it, but more so giving. It's obeying. Oh man, that's incredible. That type of worship, when we think about that in terms of God, like how he sees that as well. Man, there's more on that as we go. Okay, so the next thing, I almost skipped on. He says, we will worship there, and circle this. He says, and then we will return. We will come right back. We, as in myself and my son Isaac, will return. It's like, why would he say that? What, what is going on? And here's time to make a little note of what did Abraham know here? Okay, what was going on? Why was there no rebuttal? Why was there no questioning? What did he know? And here he says, and we will return. What does this mean? What did Abraham know? Okay, it's awesome. Hang on to that question, but highlight that. He expected that he and his son were going to return. This is an awesome, awesome thing. Hang on to it. We'll get back to it here at the end, and as we kind of reflect back. So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. Okay, and as the two of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, Father, yes, my son, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the sacrifice, for the burnt offering? Man, all right, so hang on a second, okay? I want you to pick up on another few key words here. Remember when, back on the last page, when it talked about he chopped the wood for fire, for the burnt offering, and set out. And I want you to notice that Abraham placed the wood for the offering on Isaac's shoulders. Okay, this can tell us a little bit maybe about how much time has passed. He was at least old enough to carry wood, on his shoulders. Okay, he was old enough to kind of understand this concept. So a lot of the scholars, a lot of the commentary seem to think that at this point Isaac was maybe in his 20s. Some say that he was early 30s. I don't want to nail down a specific age. Who knows? But this kind of gives us an idea of where his mind was, where his body, what he was able to carry this wood for the offering and everything. Okay, and he has the mindset to think this way. We have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the offering? Okay, I want you to underline and highlight that he placed the wood on Isaac's shoulders. And then I also want you to highlight where he says, where is the lamb for the offering, for the sacrifice? We'll get back to it. Watch how this unfolds, okay? So Abraham replied to Isaac in verse 8, God will provide the lamb for the offering, my son. Again, I can imagine as a father knowing what God has asked me to do, right? It's been a 3-day journey, probably not an easy one. And now I'm walking towards the mountain with my son. He's got the wood, which will be lit for his own sacrifice. I don't know what Isaac knows here, at this point, but me as I'm sitting here and he says, imagine hearing this as a father. We have the fire and the wood, but where's the sacrifice? How deeply this cuts in to him at this point. But look at how he responds. Look at Abraham's faith here. What does he know? Okay, we're going to get to it, but what does he know right here when he says, God will provide a lamb for the offering, my son? Man, he doesn't go on and further explain. It's just, he will provide. All right, and they both walked on together. Highlight that. God will provide a lamb, my son. Okay, is some of this starting to click together as what this is pointing to? I told you there's a deeper purpose, more, underneath this test of Abraham. All right, starting to come together. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Underline this, highlight it. Then he tied his son. He bound Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Again, highlight this. You're going to wear out your highlighter. Underline. You can highlight the whole thing, the whole chapter. Underline it, but make a note of this. Is that then he bound his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. He was laid down on top of it. All right, and in verse 10, Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. And at that moment, the angel of the Lord, this is a familiar guy here, right? The angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, he replied, here I am. The angel said, don't lay a hand on the boy. Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket, in a bush. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. And so Abraham named that place Yahweh Yareh, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. And I didn't forget, we got to get back into that in just a second, but didn't forget because the map is right here. Is that Mount Moriah, where they were. If you look on a map, whoo, what's right there is good old Jerusalem, okay? And man, so that's pointing to something else, a bigger picture. But look at Abraham's faith here. Notice how we know that the Lord can see into our heart at at our doubt, what we're thinking, even at our faith, everything like that. You remember back chapters ago when the Lord considered Abraham righteous, okay, because he could see, what was going to take place. He could look ahead and know that this man, what he was going to go through with what the Lord had commanded. And the Lord, the angel of the Lord called down and said, oh my goodness, I now know that you truly fear God. He could see into Abraham's heart, and what was in his heart was actually being acted out. His obedience was being literally acted out. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. And look how the Lord provided back when Isaac said, "Where's the lamb at?" And Abraham said, "God will provide." That I don't even know if he knew that was a prophetic thing that he was prophesying over this moment right here, because then Abraham looked up and he saw not a lamb, not the lamb, okay, but a ram caught by his horns in a bush. And that ram was sacrificed in place of his son. Whew. Wow. All right. So, first let's tackle this. Actually, I think that we can. Yeah, we wanna get to the thing. What did Abraham know right here with all of this when the Lord asked him, commanded him to go and sacrifice his son? Okay. Remember, oh man, all the way back to chapter 3, the promised seed. Okay, that's to come to destroy the sin that had taken place in our lives, to destroy the enemy, that serpent of Satan. All right, and that he was also going to be bruised. He was going to have a shot taken on his heel. Yet he would crush the enemy, underneath his foot and everything. So all of this getting passed down, throughout the generations, into Abraham, who believed so much in this seed to come. And remember how God's promises to Abraham talked about this great nation and everything, and through your descendants it will be a blessing to the entire world. Abraham was getting this picture that something or someone was to come. That promised seed was to come through his line, which was going to be a blessing for the entire world. And man, what did Abraham know? Okay, he had to have an idea that this was representing something, that this test was, yes, he had to follow through with his faith, but it also represented something so much more, and a deeper belief of God's power and what he would do. We can go to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17 through 19. Check this out. This, when we say, well, okay, what did Abraham know, or what did he believe in right here to be able to go through this? And man, it tells us right here. Okay, first part of it, 17, it says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises was offering up his only begotten son. It was he to whom it was said, in Isaac your descendants shall be called. He considered that God is able to raise people even from the dead, from which he also received him back as a type. Wow. This is giving us insight, folks, into what was going on in Abraham's mind. Remember when he said, "We will worship there and then we will return." Abraham had so much faith in the promise of God. He knew that this promised son of Isaac was also going to extend the promises even further. Through Isaac were going to be all of the descendants, as many as the stars in the sky, the sand, and everything, you name it. He knew that God was going to fulfill this, that was not going to be voided somehow. And so he even thought here that his faith was so that he considered that God is even able to raise people from the dead, from which he also received him back as a type. And this is how Abraham, this is his thought process here. This is his, not his thought process, his faith process here, his heart process. Think about that. Okay, so that's one part of it. He had such faith that he knew, oh, God's power, his promise. I have such faith that what he's been saying, and he brought this forth. He's showing me along the way more and more specifics of this promise. And I know that even though he's telling me this, I believe that he, even if my child, my son is sacrificed, that he will raise him and come back. Okay, whoo, from the dead. And notice there in the 19 of Hebrews that he received him back as a type. Now, I think that's a great segue because remember Noah and the ark. And we got to the point where we uncovered and discovered so much about that whole event and how that faith led to the building of this ark of security that was built, upon faith and the command of God, okay, and under the instruction of God, which would rise above the same floodwaters that would destroy everyone else. Okay, and how that event there, how that ark symbolized and was a type of Christ. It was showing us Jesus Christ. It was giving us some sort of earthly copy. This event was a copy of something that pointed us to Christ and how symbolic his life, okay, and his security and his promise and everything was going to be if we have faith and believe in him. Okay, so think about that, and let's bring that into this story right here. Okay, before we reflect back on it, and I want you to keep reading through the rest of this, okay, because the angel of the Lord called again to Abraham from heaven. He says, "This is what the Lord says, because you have obeyed me and not withheld even your son, your only son. I swear by my own name that I will certainly bless you. Multiply your descendants beyond number, like the stars in the sky, sand on the seashore. Your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies." This is a new detail. Remember, every time we have this act of faith and whatnot, he gives a new detail. This is a new one. "And through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. All because you have obeyed me." Okay, and then it goes through the end of the chapter through a little bit of history, lineage, and whatnot. And what I want you to highlight, one name in verse 23 is Rebecca. Okay, very important. Highlight her name, and we'll get into that. It's important. We'll get into it later. Okay. But before we reflect back over this chapter and uncover that amazing nugget, I hope it's starting to click for you. But just in case, man, let's just nail it home here. Let's go to, we're going to go to John chapter 8, verse 56. And this is Jesus here. He's speaking to the Jews, okay, right here in this moment. Don't want to get all into the context, but he's speaking to them right here. And in verse 56, something very interesting that he says, okay, and this is 1,000 years later. He says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." Okay. The Jews hearing this, I'll just read on. So the Jews said to him, "You are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham?" Oh man, he says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was born, I am." Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. Rejoiced to see my day. And he saw it and was glad. What is Jesus talking about here? And he went on to mention that before Abraham was born, I am. Hold on to that. That is amazing. But what else did Abraham know here? Okay, and we bring this into the context of this whole event being a type of Christ. Here are a few things that we got to see here. Okay, look at how we talked about how Abraham placed the wood on Isaac's shoulders. And if you read anything about Jesus on the day of his sacrifice, and even before, okay, and how he carried the cross on his shoulder. Here's one part of that. The wood is placed on Isaac's shoulders. Okay, the fact that Isaac was to be pierced with a knife. Okay, remember how Jesus was pierced. Okay, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb? Who is Jesus Christ when he is talked about? He's the Lamb of God. Okay, God will provide a lamb, my son, for the offering. Abraham was prophesying here. Okay, oh man, we'll get into that. Hang on. He tied him. Isaac was bound. He was laid down. He was laid down on the altar on top of the wood. So think about when they nailed Jesus to the cross. They laid the cross down on the ground. He was laid upon it. Okay, and when they nailed people to the cross, what did they also do so that their weight wouldn't pull the nails and they would fall off the cross? What did they do also to the hands and feet? They bound them. They tied them up. Are you seeing this, guys? Wow. And this whole thing was about sacrifice here. What did Jesus do for us? And the fact that here the Lord stopped it. Okay, he just said, now I know that in your heart that you were willing to go through for this. You were willing to do the one thing not withheld from me, even your son, your only son, the thing that was promised and given to you. All right, and then it was replaced by a ram. And this whole place that Abraham named the place Yahweh Yareh, the Lord will provide. He will provide the lamb for the sacrifice. And again, you look at where this Mount Moriah is in terms of Jerusalem, and where Jesus Christ would be sacrificed up on a hill. Man, folks, this whole thing here, yes, this was a test for Abraham, and he passed it with flying colors. But do you see how this right here is a copy, a reflection, something that is pointing us to what is to come for Jesus Christ? And so, right here, right now, in this moment, Abraham had such faith. And when Jesus said, "He saw my day," man, we gotta think that right here, this was a part of everything that Jesus, symbolic of everything that Jesus was going to have to go through, was going to have to endure. Maybe Abraham didn't understand it completely, but he experienced it. He was seeing it. Okay. Oh man. And it says he was glad. This is amazing, right? At how this is Jesus Christ. This whole thing right here is telling us, is pointing us to Jesus Christ. And that this man, this father of faith, whew, oh, he believed, man. He believed. He's like, I know this promise, everything. God, you will do it. He believed that even Isaac would be raised from the dead. And again, when you look back at this moment, again, he believed that Isaac would be raised from the dead. And man, surely enough, was Jesus. He will be, as when we get to that point in the New Testament. Such an incredible thing. Again, there's so much that you can go into. Wow, in this whole chapter, you could just go on and on and on. It is incredible. Talking about the angel of the Lord again. Here we go. You know, who is this? I hope you're starting to get a sense of who we talked about. This is the Lord himself. Okay, he said, because you have obeyed me and not withheld your only son, I swear by my own name, I will bless you. I will multiply you. Okay, who's speaking with that authority? The Lord himself. This is an amazing thing. The Study Bible says, notice the parallel between the ram offered on the altar as a substitute for Isaac and Christ offered on the cross as a substitute for us. Whereas God stopped Abraham from sacrificing his son, God did not spare his own son, Jesus, from dying on the cross. We go back again. Your son, your only son, whom you love so much. Sacrifice him. This was what God was literally going to do. This was a copy of what God was going to bring about and fulfill. And he didn't allow us to do it. Okay, he didn't want us to go through that. Keep in mind, around this whole land, we're going to come to find out that in Canaan and all these people, oh man, that some of these kings and kingdoms, they were sacrificing their children, thinking that they were, you know, getting up into a different spiritual level and all that. And this was, man, an abomination to God. Okay, and God was not going to let us do that, but instead there would be a substitute. There would be sacrifice of all sacrifices. So look at how all of this ties to God and him giving us his son, Jesus Christ. It's such an amazing thing that I just want you to reflect over forever. Really, again, huge chapter. I think we'll stop there. We're at a good time here. But man, this just blows me away. I hope that made sense. I hope it's clicking. Two different things there, two different themes wrapped in. It's not just one purpose. It tells us so much more, you know, than just the surface of this. That this was a test. It tells us so much more and points ahead to Christ and how much this represents him and his life and what's going to happen. It is incredible. I'm telling you, the Bible is so deep and so incredibly amazing. Man, just let that soak in. Going to take some time going off and traveling up to see my family next week and everything, and for a wedding of a great friend of mine and whatnot. Excited about that. So probably be another week or so before we get to the next video, but we'll pick up. I think in chapter 23 we'll go through that, and possibly 24 as well. We'll get into that, but pray over this. I forgot to say that at the beginning. Pray over this word, man, and just thank you. This is amazing.